This is the Franchise QB podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs to win big in franchising. We huddle up weekly to educate our audience about the most successful small business model ever created, franchising.
Welcome to the Franchise QB podcast. I'm your host, Mike Halpern, a 20-year industry veteran and entrepreneur. My mission is for listeners to achieve their American dreams of creating wealth and independence through franchise ownership. Every week, we speak with franchisees, franchisors, or vendors that support the industry. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. Welcome to the Franchise QB podcast. I'm your host, Mike Halpern, a 20-year franchise industry veteran and entrepreneur. Today, we have two very exciting guests joining us in the huddle. Dan Clapp, CEO and co-founder, and Zach Nolte, COO and brand president of Voda Cleaning and Restoration. Welcome, Dan and Zach.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having us. We're excited to be on the Franchise QB podcast.
Awesome. So, Dan, let's start with you. You are the CEO of Voda. This is your first role as an owner of a franchise system, but certainly not your first exposure to franchising. Take us back and tell us how you got into franchising and eventually how that led you to Voda.
Absolutely. Well, looking back on my journey of 10 years in franchising, it's almost like it was designed for me to be in the role that I'm in now. But in the time, I never knew that. I guess that's often in life. I started out in college with a staffing business. I staffed event staff workers, and it was a good business in my young age, formative years, but it was more of a business. It was more of a job than a business. So I definitely got my work ethic from there because I couldn't not work. I couldn't be sick, or the business would fall apart. And so I learned a lot from that. And in my early 20s, I wanted to sell that business, and I couldn't because it wasn't an asset. It was just a job. I was self-employed. I wasn't a business owner. And so I started looking at franchise opportunities in the home services space because I had saved up some money, and home services seemed like a good opportunity, lower investment. And when I was 18, I sold Kirby vacuum cleaners, floor cleaning basically, which is ironic. Here I am now owning a floor cleaning business, but I thought I could do home services, and the sales component made sense to me. So started looking at franchise opportunities like a lot of people probably listening to your podcast, and just fell in love with the process of exploring businesses. And so instead of buying a franchise as a home services, I ended up deciding to be a business and franchise consultant and broker with a franchise system called Murphy Business and Financial, and that was in 2014. Did that for a while, learned a lot. I did learn some lessons in the franchise system that I thought could be done better, and so I held on to those for the future, and ended up breaking off on my own in 2016. I realized that I was, again, really more self-employed than a business owner because as a business broker, everything was reliant on me. And I really wanted to build systems. And so in 2016, I co-founded a lead generation company called Career Transition Leads, which generates leads in the franchise industry. Did that from 2016 to 2022. And then that business was acquired by private equity last year. We had about, between contractors and employees, about 100 people. And it was a pretty well-oiled machine. But in doing that business, I learned a lot of people, met a lot of people, built a lot of relationships, and was able to get into, that's a different story, how we started, how we acquired Voda, but that's how I got into the seat. And then just to finalize that story, September last year, I was at a franchise conference. I knew I wanted to be a franchisor, realized pretty quickly I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And so called up my buddy, Zach Nolte, who I've known for a while, and said, hey, I'm good at one thing. You're better at everything else. Let's merge our brains, and I'll hand it over to Zach.
Yeah, that's a good segue into Zach. So Zach, like Dan, you're not new to franchising. You have a long history in the home services segment of franchising. Tell us a bit about that experience and how it translates to your new role as CEO and co-founder with Voda.
Yeah, I kind of stepped into the home services arena about 10 years ago under a brand called Kitchen Solvers. It was a great brand, and at the time it was kind of trying to find its identity a little bit. And so we ended up spending a lot of time kind of reformatting that entire business, really trying to make it into a scalable business. It was really built off of the backs of people that loved woodworking and loved installation, but they were doing everything. And when it came to actually sell their business, there was nothing to sell. And so we had to change that model so that they could use it for their retirement or pass it on to their kids. Whatever they wanted to do with it, we wanted to make that happen for them. So we spent a lot of time kind of redefining what Kitchen Solvers was. It was a tough process because we now had to convince at the time like 30 owners, upwards of 40, 50 franchises, territories, that we had to go in a new direction. And so it didn't initially start off like super well, but we started trying to change in the identity and really looking at a lot of different aspects of the business. I'm a big believer in the FBR survey. And at the time when I left Kitchen Solvers, we were ranking in the top 10% within the FBR surveys. And so it was fun transition. I learned a lot. I was able to really kind of hone into some of the best vendors, best support. And also during that time, I started another company called Kitchen Wise. And that was a franchise model that was built off of the fun organization of kitchen and space saving efficiencies and all that type of stuff. It was a completely different model than Kitchen Solvers, really focused on the small ticket and kind of a little higher pressure sales. But it was a great model. I ended up selling that to another platform shortly after, about 3 years after I started it. So,
gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah.
So you guys also have kind of co-founded a kind of a parent company called Franchise Playbook. Tell us a little bit about Playbook and what your ultimate vision is for that company as it kind of comes into its own.
Yeah, so when Zach and I decided to work together, we really felt like we had a lot of experience to leverage in franchising. And what we saw was that there was many home service platforms out there, but majority, if not all, were private equity owned or gearing up to sell to private equity or to be some sort of institutional capital. And we felt like we were in this area where we could be, I don't want to say the underdog, but the young, hungry, energetic kind of underdog, frankly. And so our vision is to build the largest privately held home services platform, which is what we're building with Franchise Playbook. And what we've done is we've merged a couple things. One, we bring in the brightest minds in franchising in their respective fields. Two, we're building a culture that I don't think anyone that would be owned by institutional capital can do, because we're making investments that maybe are not lucrative to the P&L on a quarterly basis. We're making investments that may not see benefit for three years or even 5 years out. Our time horizon is much longer. And so we're thinking about our franchisees now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, which allows us to make decisions different than other home service platforms. And so we acquired Voda in February of this year because they really, first off, the founder, Dragon, he's a great friend and partner with us now in Voda, and he shared the same core values as Zach and I, which is an obsession over the customer experience. For him, it was the customer, the end user, the restoration and floor cleaning customer. And for us, our customer is the franchise owner, and that's how we see it. And so our first brand is in the cleaning and restoration, floor cleaning and restoration space, and we'll have other brands in the future that complement that.
That's great. Yeah, when I met you guys at National Harbor in Maryland a couple of months back, I had the pleasure of meeting with Arlene and Dragon, and it was really cool to hear their story. So that was really impressive. And I can see why you guys picked them as partners. They're good people, and they have a great business. So let's talk a little bit about Voda, because that's the flagship Playbook brand. It is the first and only cleaning and restoration franchise opportunity. The tagline is a new level of clean, a new level of franchise. What does that mean for the consumer and for the franchise owner?
Yeah, well, I'll jump in and then hand it over to Zach. I mean, from the franchise perspective, Mike, our vision for Voda has expanded a bit as we've seen the initial success. And that's something I always tell people when they're looking at getting into a business. Start with one goal, hit that goal, and then make your vision even bigger. And so we feel confident in our vision, which is that we really do want to build one of, if not the largest, most known brands in home services. What I mean by that, forget about restoration, forget about cleaning, painting, whatever the industry. We want to be a household name in home services where you know that brand. To me, one of the most iconic brands in home services is Stanley Steamer. We all know the jingle, the yellow and black trucks. What's that?
Yeah, no, I know the jingle. Once you say it, it just goes in your mind. So, yep.
Yeah, and so they're one of the largest home service brands, at least well known to consumers, and that's a floor cleaning business. And then to me, another very well known home service brand is ServPro, and they're a restoration business. Well, we've merged floor cleaning and restoration, and then created a really unique brand in the way Voda looks. So we want to be able to touch as many homes and consumers as we can with the brand.
That's great. So I had the opportunity to kind of meet you guys twice, once at the FranServe convention and then at your National Harbor event. You have a really impressive team. Tell us a little bit more about the team that you've built, from the ground up to support the first batch of owners that join your emerging franchise brand.
Yeah, so a big proponent of what we're trying to build is trying to bring in the brightest minds in franchising. And initially, I think when Dan and I first started talking about, we do have a passion for wanting to get new people into franchising and wanted them to grow within the system. But we started looking at like a scaling model, and we knew that in order to hit our goals and also to gain the trust of our franchise prospects, is that we wanted to make sure that we have the best people in each of the seats. And so this just went down to finding a CMO that's probably one of the most decorated, and also the kind of a true jack of all trades, and can do anything within marketing. He's now leading our entire marketing kind of efforts, and the people that he's going to be able to kind of grow within that company or within the position, like they're going to learn a ton from him. And he's establishing this amazing brand to all the collateral, to all the stuff that we're pushing out there. Then we knew that we needed to go out and get a restoration expert. So we went out and found probably, again, one of the most decorated restoration guys within restoration. And he has a ton of experience within catastrophic events, working within the franchise model, has worked with a number of franchisees, and that's what his passion is he wants to be in the field supporting and coaching and training our franchise partners. And so we're continuing to find these people that not only have the wherewithal to want to educate and coach and train, but also are very, very educated in the restoration space and cleaning space. So at every step of the way, we have amazing support.
Very cool. So I've heard you guys talk about your RTBs, your reasons to believe. In any business, it's good to have recurring revenue and multiple revenue streams. Explain the advantages of this two-pronged revenue model that Voda offers by operating both in the cleaning space and the restoration segment.
Yeah, I mean, we're the first, as you mentioned, the first and only floor cleaning and restoration business. No one's done that in franchising, really, because in my opinion, it's because it's two business models and they've broken them up. They figured, hey, I can get cleaning business and restoration. And we've said, no, let's merge them. That is two revenue streams, two business models. But most importantly, it's not like we're painting houses and, detailing cars. They're very similar businesses within one franchise system. And so, if you Google what's one of the best lead sources for restoration, it's floor cleaning. And what's one of the best lead sources for floor cleaning? Restoration. And so we've merged those two. Really where for franchise owners, what we do that separates us, our unique selling propositions or reasons to believe, is what I consider the 4 pillars of support. Number one, we do all the lead generation when it comes to online, Google, Facebook, paid media, anything that has to do with making the phones ring, we do at our corporate team. We consider ourselves a lead generation company that happens to sell restoration services. Secondarily, we have a call center to answer all of those calls and make sure that we're very quick to answer calls, because that's how you win restoration jobs and cleaning jobs, and really any business is speed to lead. The second pillar for us has to do with hiring support. So we have a program called Talent Scout. You'll appreciate this, just like your Franchise QB podcast. We love football analogies, and so we call it the Talent Scout to find talent for your team. We actually recently, Zach was able to very quickly find Zach and his team was able to find a general manager for our Pennsylvania franchise owner within a short period of time. We have a great program to find, if you will, leads for hiring. So we have Talent Scout. Third pillar has to do with back-end office support. And so we actually do all of our franchise owners' bookkeeping and finance. We reconcile their bank accounts. Everything's done for them where they can just tune in. It's funny. We use the program at Playbook. I tuned into it last night for Voda. checking the P&L late at night, and everything's just dialed in. I don't have to worry about anything. Everything's done. Zach's also helping make sure, but that program's really great. And then we have, KPI tracking within that back office. So we give them all of their dialed in scoreboard analytics to help manage their business. And then the fourth pillar has to do with support and training. I've never seen a franchise system where you go through training online, you then go to our facility for a week for a very extensive boot camp. They're out there in the spring training, or in this case, fall training. And then they actually can go out to DC, where our flagship location is, and spend even more time. So we're just doing a ton of training and support. So around those pillars, that's really where we separate ourselves as a franchise opportunity.
Yeah, it sounds like a real plug and play model. Once the right owners are kind of in the system and they follow it, they have kind of like a roadmap to success with Voda. That sounds real exciting. So Zach, Dan talked about the kind of two-pronged approach. How do you cram all that stuff in one van? Are you able to get everything you need for a cleaning business, everything you need for a restoration business in that one van? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, and not really being from this industry, specifically cleaning and restoration, I didn't really know what we were doing and how different it was until just recently, really. And so me and the founder of Dragon, we really worked together to try to figure out how can we set up the vans differently and how can we provide better value to our franchise partners. And so what we did is we reorganized the entire van so that you have the space in the back of the van to carry a lot of restoration equipment, but also still have all of the equipment, the cleaning wands and the truck mount in the front of the van to be able to do all your cleaning, floor cleaning jobs as well. So you could pack out that entire van, move around, and if you did get dispatched from a cleaning job to a restoration, you can take that one van and very easily move right into the next. And so we put a lot of time and effort into that, and there aren't a lot of businesses that start off with the type of equipment that we do. It's a gorilla of a machine. It's the 500-pound gorilla that's out there that's can do anything.
I've heard it. It's impressive. It attracts people from near and far when you hear that thing purr.
Yeah. It definitely turns some heads, and it's a fun machine to play around with. And the extraction on that thing is just it's a beautiful thing once you understand the model a little bit. So that's how we were able to really kind of change the game a little bit, working with some of the best vendors in the space to help us kind of bring our vision to life as well was definitely a huge plus on our end.
Very cool. So let's kind of segue into the economics, because clearly that equipment side is going to drive some of the cost to get in. So we're looking at about 146 to 198K to get in the business. Just give us a quick overview of what that package looks like. Some working capital, the equipment, leasing, kind of a runway of working capital. What's that all look like?
Yeah, you will find that there's probably a couple of things that stand out. That we're probably in the little bit of the higher side of the investment in when it comes to the van. The van is about $110,000 build out, but that van can also do everything from your cleaning to restoration. You also notice that we are pretty heavy on the tech side of things. We don't skimp on any technology, and we're also always looking for ways to innovate and bring new technologies into the business to help either eliminate the human need and also streamline the process to make it more efficient for us to get payments collected faster from insurance companies and make the project management of those a lot more seamless. So we do use a lot of technology to do that. And also our CRM is probably one of the easiest CRMs I've ever been in and also worked within. So you'll definitely notice a few of those things. But we also, I truly believe that we have a very true look at item 7 where every single one of the costs is broken down into that item 7 down to like your QuickBooks Online, your bookkeeping fees, everything you need to run all of our marketing. It's all in there. So when you do run your numbers and you put together your own financial performance, there isn't a whole lot missing from that list.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. And obviously that investment is very reasonable for what you get, under 200K all in. So let's talk about performance. I know that we're basing this off of the flagship location. What can you share with us in terms of what's in the FDD for last year, in terms of performance, in terms of how the vans perform, in terms of the kind of gross sales, anything else that you're comfortable sharing on the economic side of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just jump in for 1 second on that item 7. And sorry if you saw me double multitasking for a second. I had a fire to put out, although we call it a flood to put out. I had a flood to put out.
Dan, I
really
wouldn't
quick,
expect
so
anything else. You're a busy guy.
or it's ADD. It's one or the other. But I was putting out a flood anyway. So with the item 7, one of the things to keep in mind, like this is Zach's third brand, our CMO's multiple brands, Arthur's third or fourth brand, our VP of Ops. And most franchisors in the emerging space, they start a business, they succeed at that, and then they franchise. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a completely different business model to being a franchisor. So for us, we didn't start restoration, succeed, and then attempt franchising. We've all franchised businesses and then came into restoration. We have our founder as the flagship expert along with Arthur. And so what I have found in my decade of franchising is that item 7s often with emerging brands are wrong, quite frankly. And they underestimate some of the expenses that franchise owners may have or will have. And so what we see is sometimes when I'm talking to a candidate who is looking at us and comparing to maybe another, for example, restoration brand, we've put things in place to help make their business more efficient. So we may, for a second, look more expensive because we have more technology or something else, but we've put that in place knowing that this is where they're going to need later. We just happen to be upfront about those expenses, early in the item 7.
Yeah, and just if I can add to that, Dan, I think it's really important, any candidate for any franchise, always look at that high end of the item 7 as what you should expect, because that way you're planning for it, you're prepared. And as we all know, undercapitalized franchisees have a lot of struggles to succeed. You want to have that good runway of capital to reinvest in a good thing. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and then I'll pass back to Zach, but as far as the item 7, we tried to be extremely transparent about every expense. The item 19, we did the same thing by putting the entire profit and loss into the item 19 financials, which allows franchise owners to really understand, hey, if I want to scale this business, what am I going to need? And they could see all the expenses.
Very cool. So in terms of the performance in the item 19, what can you share with us in that regard?
Just from a high level, total gross revenue in 2022 was 1.7 million. We have all the gross profit numbers in there at 61%. And then we also list out all their all the founding locations expenses from that year as well. So some of these expenses, are things that they may incur, may not incur, but they can kind of go through and sort those out themselves. And at the end of the day, or at the end of that year, we have an EBITDA of 32%, and then we adjusted that. We also added in the royalties, because obviously they weren't paying royalties when they were not in the system. So we added in royalties and brand fund, and that put them at a 23% adjusted EBITDA.
Yeah, low to mid 20s on this model is really attractive. That's great that you put in that full P&L so people get the full picture. Appreciate that. So let's talk scalability. A new owner is going to start with 1 van, 2 techs. How quickly do you kind of encourage them to get to that second van so they can be on their way to kind of building that fleet?
Yeah, it's I always like to start, and one of the first exercises that we walk through with our franchise partners is really dialing into what their first year goals are, and even what they want to be in 5 years. We then can take those numbers and we can work those numbers backwards. And I know where the capacities of our vans are, and so a van can only do so much restoration in a single month. Can only do so much floor cleaning in a single month. And so if I know where those capacities are, we can then kind of prepare ourselves for when we need to make that second investment. And so looking at our item 19 numbers, you're able to kind of see when I start hitting a certain threshold in sales, that's when I need to invest in another van. And so we can help you kind of foresee that and make those projections, but also too, you can prepare yourself to say, hey, I'm getting to this point where I need to invest in another van. Let's go make that happen. We can turn those vans around in about 6 to 8 weeks. So you have a little bit of leeway time there.
That's great. So let's talk about territories. A candidate really likes your model and wants to secure a territory to kind of become an owner with Voda. What does that look like? Is it based on households? Is it based on population? How are those formed?
Yeah, and Mike, just to touch on the item 19 or financial performance for one quick second, we chose restoration not because we fell in love with water extraction, but because Zach and I made a playbook of what we wanted. We wanted a need, not a want. We wanted pandemic-proof, recession-resistant. We wanted third party to pay like insurance pays for restoration, a growing industry, non-skilled labor. I can go on and on. But restoration screamed out us, and then combining the floor cleaning and restoration is really what we loved. But with all that said, we loved Voda flagship location for having 1.75 million in gross sales and a 23% net. But what we found was that was the industry. So we think we absolutely revolutionized the industry with the way we do restoration, but it's not like we're some anomaly where we're doing, millions of dollars and the industry doesn't. I look at it from a larger population size and say, hey, the average restoration company in America, franchise or not, does pretty well revenue-wise and margin-wise. And so that's what we fell in love and felt safer and more comfortable about presenting this opportunity. It's knowing that, we had those tried and true numbers of restoration. And I don't think restoration's like a, yogurt where it popped up and it's going to go away. I think we'll keep having floods, unfortunately, for a while. And that's coming from experience. I've sold franchises for a long time in my previous career and saw franchise people, buy in and industry change. Territory-wise, I'll hand that back to Zach, but, we definitely, thank you for asking. Our territories are 85,000 owner-occupied households, which is an exclusive territory. Sometimes people get confused, different ways people do franchise territories. Some do households, some do population. So we have had people sometimes think we have 85,000 people. It's not the case. It's actually a very large territory, but I'll pass that question to Zach.
Yeah, we definitely do our due diligence as well, kind of looking at the territory, making sure that it fits our demographic needs. And also, it doesn't really even take in consideration at all the property management side of things and the commercial side of the business as well. So there's even more opportunity on top of that within our territories.
Very cool. Thanks. And I know you guys made a pretty big investment in the branding, logo, vehicle wraps, kind of the look of Voda, the trade dress. Why is that important for you guys as an emerging brand to kind of stand out? What was the kind of logic behind so much emphasis on getting the right branding to launch this thing?
Well, to me, when you're investing in a franchise, you're investing in three things, right? The brand, the systems, and the leadership team. And so we knew we could add the leadership team as we went if we invested in the right people. And the systems were there with the original Voda flagship and then what Zach and his team was able to implement. But the brand, you only get one shot. You can't change it later. It's very hard to.
Right.
And what we saw in the platforms that acquire brands, specifically the ones that make large acquisitions of brands for millions and millions and millions of dollars, they can't really, and nothing wrong with that, but they can't really change those brands. The founder of that business started in their hometown. They did well. Maybe they did a brand refresh when they launched their franchise, and now it's a 10-year-old company. They can't change it. And so we felt like we had this unique opportunity to create a brand that stood out to the minds and hearts of the consumers of today and also of tomorrow, the Gen Z that will eventually be homeowners as well. And so we put a lot of energy and resources into that, knowing we could only do it the one time. It's hard to change later.
Yeah, I think you guys knocked it out of the park. It's sleek, it's memorable, and it shows well on everything you guys kind of put the logo and branding on. So kudos to that. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about development. I saw just this week you guys awarded territories in 2 new states, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and West Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. You guys were on fire. So talk to us about how many franchises have been awarded in your first few months of franchising the Voda model, and how many territories do those owners represent?
I'll take that one since it's my side of the business. No, everything's a team effort. But, we do believe that, while we're appreciative of the initial early success and rocket ship growth that we're experiencing, especially through consultants like yourself, Mike, and with FranServe and everything we're doing, we believe that we will actually more be like an arrow where you pull back the arrow and then it shoots, because we feel like the validation and the systems are really where we'll start to, the franchise will sell itself, if you will. But we've awarded 13 territories in the past 2 months or so, 2.5 months, to 7 franchise owners. And I think that's important to note. I've been in franchise development a long time. Nothing wrong with buying 3 or 4 or 5 territories, but it depends on the owner. And we're being extremely mindful that we don't award too much territory to people that are not ready for it. Someone who's ready for it, that's fine. But we want to make sure we award like the right amount of territory to franchise partners. And then we're also extremely proud that, I think we could be at, 26 units right now if we weren't being so selective with who we bring in. But we've turned down probably maybe not half as many people, but a good amount that we just know don't fit our core values. It's interesting. I've been in this space 10 years. I was always told you don't really know. How do you really know if someone can succeed with your brand? You know what you do know? Core values. They're non-negotiable. I don't care if someone comes to our system with millions of dollars and they seem great. If they don't match those core values, then they're just a better fit for a different system. And I think we'll continue to use that as our North Star to guide the decisions and who we bring in, is if they match our core values or not. And that's how it's funny. Zach always jokes around when we go to events. All our franchise owners seem very similar. And I think it's truthful, because what builds a good relationship, right? When two people share the same core values. So we'll continue to lean into that.
Very cool. No, I think that's so important. You got to build a foundation of like-minded owners that are, joining the system for the right reasons and are going to follow the system. So it sounds like you guys are making really good decisions up front for the long term of the brand. So I know I've taken up a lot of your time. Anything else you want to add to the conversation? Any parting thoughts that we haven't discussed yet?
No, I think we covered a lot of good information, and just to kind of touch on Dan's last comment too, it's that I've never seen this before. We've found this like the same type of like personality over and over and over again in all these different territories. And when we get on these conversations, like we're having a great time, we're having fun, but we're all like bearing down and we're just like crushing out these tasks and going through the onboarding process as quick as possible. And we got some really hungry people. And they come in, they all have the same personalities, but all look a little different. I mean, our first owner was a female, and she's, crushing it right now. She's going through some additional training with our founding location. But everybody just comes in just hungry to succeed and be part of this amazing culture that we're building right now.
Sounds great. Sounds like a really mindful process, not only building the right executive team around the brand, but also recruiting the right owners. So if you would like to connect with Dan and Zach to learn more about the process to own a Voda cleaning and restoration franchise territory, contact me at franchiseqb.com or on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB. I'll get you connected with the guys. Thank you, Dan and Zach, for taking the time to get in the huddle and speak with us about Voda cleaning and restoration. Really appreciate it, guys.
Yes, thanks for having us on.
Thank you, Mike. And, I know you're not asking us to do this, but I'm doing it anyway. If you're listening to this podcast, I've known Mike for a while. He's one of the top consultants in the country. So you got someone great to speak with if you do decide to pursue looking at Voda or any franchise business.
I appreciate that, Dan. Feelings mutual. Thanks so much, guys. Thank you for listening to the Franchise QB podcast, where you're at the helm of your future as a franchise owner. If you enjoyed the content, please rate the show and recommend it to anyone that might be interested in franchising. Make sure to visit franchiseqb.com to subscribe to my newsletter and for an actionable playbook to go from walk-on to legend in your new business. Follow us on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB and join us every week for a new episode. See you next time.
Visit franchiseqb.com to take the next step of your journey towards wealth, independence, and franchise ownership. And remember, when working for the man gets old, you must do something bold. Thank you for listening.